Why, hello there, neighbor. Welcome to another Life of Bliss. Glad you could join us. All right, enough screwing around. So this week I am going to be making some built-ins on either side of the fireplace here. So I'm going to have a built-in with 3 cabinets on either side. I'm going to go ahead and make some bases out of some 2x4s, some treated 2x4s, since it'll be sitting directly on the concrete there. So let's get started making our base, and I'll kind of explain what I'm doing as I go. So Becky was going along sanding the walls. Wherever they sanded, whenever they were doing the sheetrock work, it's really rough versus where the mud is. Like this is very smooth, and it's rougher wherever they sanded on the paper. So she was going along sanding the walls now because we're going to paint these walls before we install the built-ins. That way we don't have to worry about painting them later, and since there's no trim work to worry about, we'll just go ahead and get those done now. I made the bases for the cabinets to set on. Since this is directly on concrete, like I said, it's out of treated lumber. So we'll go ahead and get some measurements, and then we'll build our sides, our bottom, and our back braces, and get our cabinet carcasses set up. And that is the correct name. Sounds kind of weird, but it's a carcass. So here's the birch plywood that I got. This is actually the back side. The front side's a little bit cleaner looking. But I'm going to go ahead and rip this down into some more manageable pieces before I throw it on my table saw to square everything up. I went ahead and got my 2 bases set out. So the bottoms, they're actually slightly different length. It just wasn't completely even on either side of the fireplace. So one is just a couple inches shorter than the other. I got 4 sides set up. I got 2 dividers, one for each of the built-ins there, and all of the support braces here. So when I was cutting these, I actually cut every single edge on the table saw, so there's no factory edges left. That was just to make sure everything was flat and square for what I was making. So what I did is when I was using that circular saw, I actually cut about 2 inches wide on every cut. And then I went back on my table saw and did 1 inch off of each edge or so to where I got my widths that I needed. Next, we're going to be joining everything together. To do this, we will be using a kreg jig for pocket holes. This thing is absolutely awesome. Cannot recommend these enough. So I got the jig set up in my drill. We're going to go ahead and glue it and then throw a few brad nails in there just to hold it steady. And then we'll come back with our screws and screw it in. We got both carcasses here. I'm going to go ahead and cut some boards for a divider that's going to go in here 1/3 of the way across. That's to separate one cabinet from the other two cabinet doors, and it will also help support this centerpiece here and give me a place to throw the centerpiece in the back and attach it as well. As you can see here, I've gone over 18 inches and marked the 18-inch mark right there. And then I've gone over 3/8 of an inch to show where that board is going to be lining up against there. So that'll be the edge of the board. I've got it marked back there as well as up top, so I know exactly where this is going to be, as well as right here. So there's center, there's 3/8 over, so that board will be centered up in the cabinet. Here's both the rear top supports put on. Next, I'm going to make a cutout to go from the back top to the bottom there. And that's just to separate the two cabinets there at the wall so there's no gap in the back. All right, I got both carcasses for the cabinets done. Here is the larger of the two. You can see that piece I just added back there just kind of fills that gap in so there's no gap with the wall back there. So next I'm going to build the frame for the cabinet doors that's going to go on the face of our cabinet here. And that's essentially just some 2-inch wide strips that we'll be putting all the way around the cabinet and then in the two spots where the doors are going to be connecting. To make the face frame, I've got some 1x8 poplar board. These were originally 8 foot long. I cut them down a little bit on my miter saw to make it a little bit more manageable for me, to make some straight cuts on here. I'm going to go ahead and get these cut down to roughly 2 inches wide, and that will be the width for all of my face frame. So one other thing to note real quick, whenever you're drilling these together, these pocket holes can actually move on you a little bit. So the best thing to do is to get these set up on a flat surface and then clamp them down. So that's what I'll be doing. I'll be moving this around a little bit and clamping it so that the face is going to be completely flat. My table saw is about the flattest surface I have right now. That's accessible to be able to do this. So we'll be doing it on here and we'll get it all together. Now everything is screwed together. There is barely any sort of lip on these joints. I'll go over it just very quickly with probably 220 on the orbital sander, and it'll knock down whatever little bump there is there. I'm going to go ahead and get my other pieces cut for my rails, or excuse me, my stiles for my doors. Alright, the first face frame is done. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and get some glue on here and throw some clamps on, tack it with a few brad nails. I will be staining this. It's going to actually be a very dark stain, so I'm not too concerned about the holes in the brad nails. I'm going to throw a little bit of wood putty in there afterwards and it'll stain over just fine. So let's get that going and get this set up on there. Okay, so while I was waiting for that faceplate to go ahead and set up and the glue to set up, I was able to get this one made and put on as well. We got everything moved down here and just kind of set in place to see how everything was going to fit. And it looks like everything's going to fit very nice. Also, I was able to come back and mark out a few spots where I had outlets and get those cutouts made as well. Now, before we install everything on the walls over there, including the supports for the bottom, we're going to go ahead and paint all of the walls so that way we don't have to worry about coming back and taping those later. I'll have to do a little bit of touching up after I do the trim on the bottom there, but this will at least help us for the cabinets. So you get to watch Becky for the next little bit paint the walls. You're doing a good job, Beck. So now that the walls are all painted up, my next step is to go ahead and get these bases leveled out and screwed into the wall. So let's go ahead and get that started. Both bases are anchored. All right, guys, so that's it for this week. I know I didn't get the cabinets completely done, but I really need to get my trim done and painted before those because, you know, I can add those after everything's in place and carpet's installed. But this is the first time I have ever done cabinets. I think they turned out pretty well. Everything's really square and it should be level as long as I did my job making the cabinets correctly. So coming soon, we'll get those set on there. We'll get some cabinet doors made, get a cabinet top made, and we'll get those installed. So next week, I'm gonna be priming, installing, and painting all of the trim on the walls. So be sure to come back and check that out. Thanks for watching this video, guys. I hope you liked it. Subscribe and like, and be sure to check back for more updates on the basement build.